6 questions. 6 knives cutting through the illusion of Hollywood's perfect facade. Gene Hackman is gone, but his story is far from over. What secrets did he take to the grave? What was hidden behind the velvet curtains of fame? And most importantly, why did Hollywood never let him go? Tonight, we uncover the dark truth they don't want you to know. Chapter 1. The Golden Boys discussed, from the dazzling lights of red carpet premieres to the champagne-drenched after-Oscar parties, Gene Hackman once held every privilege of an A-list star. Twice he gripped the golden statuette, one of the rare few who reached Hollywood's peak without bowing to its hidden forces. Yet behind the brilliance, behind the legend, was a man who quietly shut the door, turned away from the glamour, and rejected everything that others saw as glory. By the late 1980s, at the height of his career with Mississippi Burning and Unforgiven, Hackman had begun pulling away. He stopped attending grand events, declined prestigious awards, and no longer posed for smiling photos over glistening glasses of champagne. Hollywood has no loyalty, no conscience, only an endless hunger for profit. That wasn't a reckless statement. It was the cold truth, carved from years of surviving the flashing bulbs and backroom deals. Hackman was never meant to be an idol. He never craved the applause, the handshakes, the empty smiles exchanged behind velvet curtains. He loathed the industry's rituals, the forced congratulations, the polite backpats that too often preceded ruthless betrayal. There's an old story. The night Hackman won his first Oscar for The French Connection, he reportedly walked into the men's restroom at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, ripped off his bow tie, and tossed it straight into the trash. That wasn't a moment of frustration. It was the culmination of something deeper, a realization. I didn't come here for fame. I came here to work. But Hollywood wasn't built for passion. It was built to consume, to chew up dreams and spit them out. And Hackman, he refused to be swallowed. He turned down multi-million-dollar contracts, ignored invitations to lavish galas, and even rejected an offer to sit on the Academy's judging panel. To him, Hollywood was a machine, a place where the weak sold their souls just to survive another season. So he chose exile, a near unprecedented move. He severed ties with the industry, shut out the media, and disappeared to a quiet life in New Mexico with the only person who never betrayed his belief in kindness, Betsy Arakawa. But even in his silence, Hollywood never let him go. Scripts still arrived at his doorstep, despite no one knowing his exact address. Famous directors still called. His name, his legend, still echoed through the corridors of an industry he had abandoned. And then there were the secrets, the ones he had spent decades trying to bury. The ones no one was ever supposed to speak of, backstage parties, whispered deals, the silent transactions between powerful producers and desperate young stars willing to do anything to stand beneath the lights. Gene Hackman knew, and he hated himself for his silence. Perhaps that's why, in his final days, the past began to weigh heavier than ever. The sharp pains weren't just in his body, they were in his conscience, because some things refused to stay buried. The turmoil in his chest compelled him to confront the harsh realities of life. Hackman broke a silence he had maintained for nearly 50 years, revealing the first piece of a chilling narrative about Hollywood that he had witnessed. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Studio. Contrary to his seasoned, cold demeanor on screen, Gene Hackman was a smoldering fire in real life, ready to erupt whenever confronted with jarring experiences. That fire blazed most intensely for the first time on the set of The French Connection in 1971, when Hackman took on the role of Jimmy Popeye Doyle, the character that would define his career. No one anticipated that behind those gritty, realistic frames lay a period of intense tension between the lead actor and the formidable crew. Director William Friedkin was a well-known name, but his working style was a nightmare for those who resisted him. Friedkin was notorious for his brutal direction, willing to push actors to their physical and mental limits to capture authentic footage. However, for Hackman, the challenge was not just the director's harshness, it was an unseen force lurking behind the cameras. From the early days on set, Hackman sensed that the eyes watching him were not merely from the production team. There were private calls and suggestive offers from a few men he had never encountered. They didn't discuss acting, scripts, or any artistic elements. Instead, they laid out conditions in exchange for invisible support, something Hackman later referred to as the dirty deals behind the curtains. During a late-night shoot, when the entire crew was exhausted, Hackman stepped backstage for some fresh air. In a dark corner behind the studio, where the streetlights cast a dim, illusory glow, he suddenly overheard a brief conversation between the producer and a stranger. The whispers mingled with cigarette smoke, but it was enough for Hackman to grasp that this role, along with the subsequent awards and his entire career trajectory, had been orchestrated in a way he hadn't anticipated. They needed a fresh face, but one that could be easily controlled. The voice was so chilling that it sent shivers down Hackman's spine. The pent-up frustration boiled over the next morning when he confronted Friedkin and the producer directly. But all he received in return were faint smiles and challenging glances. That was the moment Hackman first understood that in this industry, actors were not artists, but mere pawns. And the footage he shot served not just the audience, but also the hidden agendas at play. From that point on, Hackman refused all private meetings with producers and steered clear of closed parties where secret deals were made under the pretense of friendly gatherings. He realized that stepping through those doors would cost him not only his career, but also his very soul. Few knew that Hackman had been offered roles in at least 3 blockbuster films of the 1970s, all of which went on to win Oscars. Yet he turned them down. Each script came with a list of non-artistic stipulations: private dinners with influential industry figures, unsigned contracts with ambiguous terms regarding image promotion, and, most infuriatingly, requests that could never be documented. Requests that made Hackman so furious he would rip the script to shreds as soon as he finished reading it. There was a persistent rumor in the film industry that Hackman never confirmed, but had been circulating for years. He had witnessed a covert deal to manipulate the Oscar results. A powerful producer had quietly negotiated with a media representative from the Academy, not concerning film quality, but rather about a media guarantee package following the awards night. From that moment on, Hackman lost faith in the Oscar campaign. For him, the golden statuette was no longer a symbol of artistic achievement, but a trophy obtained through clandestine handshakes. And as the whispers in the studio echoed every night, Hackman realized he no longer belonged in this world. Chapter 3. The Oathbreakers. In a small room by the Santa Fe coast, where Gene Hackman spent his final years to escape the noise, the old phone rang late at night. On the other end was a familiar voice, his close friend of decades, the only person Hackman still trusted enough to share the burdens he had carried since his youth. But this time, Hackman didn't call to reminisce or share old tales. He called to confess. His voice was hoarse, each word cutting through the silence like a knife. He began with a chilling, brief statement, reminiscent of the cold night wind seeping through the slightly open window. "We sold our souls for fame, and I can't die with this weight on me." Outside, the New Mexico sky was a deep black, but the true darkness filled the room where Hackman sat. No lights, no usual whiskey on the table. Only the haunting memories he had tried to bury for over 50 years, now rising like a flood. Hackman recounted his story slowly, as if each word was a stone tied to his chest. He recalled a night in 1974 at a mansion in Beverly Hills, where not only A-list stars gathered, but also powerful figures from the production, media, and political realms. It was more than just a party. It was Hackman's initiation into the inner circle, a group of veteran actors who had been canonized by Hollywood and the press, but harbored secrets that were never meant to be spoken. According to Hackman, the inner circle wasn't a secret society with elaborate rituals or blood oaths. It was a pact among those who had seen too much and knew too much about the dark underbelly of the film industry. They were like survivors of a shipwreck, holding the key to the disaster's cause but forced to remain silent to protect their lives and careers. The heaviest secret Hackman carried throughout his life, the one that eroded his soul daily, was the cover-up of a horrific crime that Hollywood had committed. A child abuse ring involving renowned filmmakers, talented actors, and those who manipulated awards and media from behind the scenes. In 1975, Hackman and a few familiar faces, famous actors who had long since left the handshakes followed each exchange, all of it seared into Hackman's memory like a dark ice flow. The next day, he and a few fellow actors, who also hadn't anticipated falling into such a hellish reality, were summoned to a closed room. They were presented with 2 choices: sign a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for roles, fame, and safety, or speak out and have their careers and lives scattered like dust. Hackman signed, not for fame, but because he realized he couldn't take on the colossal machine driven by power and money alone. It wasn't just a confession, it was a tolling bell that opened the door to hell, where Hollywood's darkest secrets awaited revelation. Chapter 4. The Missing Tapes. The small wooden house in Santa Fe, where Gene Hackman spent his final years, quickly became the center of attention after news of his passing spread. This wasn't due to local curiosity or tabloid reporters, but rather a group of individuals who preferred to remain in the shadows. They didn't come bearing flowers or memorial candles. What they sought were the tapes. Those tapes had once been the stuff of legend among veteran actors. Those who knew Hackman had a habit of recording conversations, not to blackmail or weaponize against anyone, but simply to preserve living evidence in case the truth needed to be revealed one day. Hackman referred to them as the lifeline tapes, the only connection between him and his conscience. According to an anonymous insider from the late 1980s, Hackman began this secretive practice during calls from producers in negotiations for roles. There were veiled threats about young actors who refused to cooperate, and conversations that were never recorded in official minutes between Hollywood tycoons were all silently captured by Hackman. Each tape was a fragment of what Hackman referred to as the ugliest mosaic of power he had ever witnessed. These tapes didn't just hold random sounds. They were living proof of a system that had functioned for decades, where prestigious awards weren't always about talent, where faces could vanish from the screen simply for daring to say no, and where young stars were forced to learn silence before they even knew the alphabet. Hackman once told a friend, "If you could hear what I've heard, you'd never watch another Oscar night again." Now with Hackman gone, those tapes have also disappeared. The Santa Fe police, after receiving a request from the family, conducted a thorough search of the entire house. Secret drawers, bookshelves with hidden compartments. Even every floor tile was examined. No tapes, no tape boxes. They had completely vanished. Hackman's family, especially his cousin, who lived next door for the last decade of his life, confirmed seeing the old tape boxes neatly arranged in a worn leather suitcase. Hackman never explained them, only instructing that if anything happened, they were not to be opened, but to contact a name, an old friend who never appeared in any public photo. However, when the police opened the door to Hackman's storage room, the suitcase was gone, leaving not a trace or a note behind. Someone had taken them, but the more terrifying question was whether Hackman managed to copy those tapes, and if so, where they might be. Are they in the hands of a former colleague who stood on the same side, locked away in the safe of a mysterious lawyer in New York, or have they been sent straight to a newsroom where reporters are sitting on a giant time bomb, just waiting for the right moment to detonate? Some insiders in Hollywood revealed that Hackman was not the only one aware of the existence of the tapes. Several directors, screenwriters, and even young actors who had been targeted in dark deals also knew. Yet no one dared to mention it, as they understood that just bringing up the missing tapes meant signing their own death warrant. As the lights dimmed on the deserted streets of Santa Fe, only questions hung in the darkness. What pieces of the truth did Hackman manage to leave behind? And who or what force holds the power to decide whether those secrets will ever see the light of day? In that darkness, Hollywood remained silent, as if nothing had happened. But those who knew Hackman understood that the tapes were not lost. They were just hiding, waiting for a hand brave enough to unveil the truth. Chapter 5. The Exile's Curse. From the day he officially left his last film set, Gene Hackman chose a path that was very few Hollywood icons dared to embrace, a life of complete isolation and utter solitude. Wind cutting through the cracks filled the air, as if every noise here conspired with the profound silence Hackman tried to maintain. Yet even in this sanctuary, Hollywood never truly let him go. "You can leave Hollywood, but Hollywood will never leave you," he once remarked during a private gathering with a few old friends in 2005, a statement that became a haunting curse. One of those present recalled Hackman speaking with a quiet demeanor, but beneath it lay a smoldering fear, the fear of someone who had seen too much, knew too much, and carried secrets that were never meant to be revealed. In the early years of his life in New Mexico, Hackman still maintained sporadic contact with old friends and colleagues from his past, those who stood together to protect what they called their artistic conscience. But gradually, everything faded. The phone stopped ringing, handwritten letters went unanswered, and Hackman, in a way, pushed himself into a state of complete isolation. He once joked with his cousin, "If I disappear one day, no one will know." But it was more than just a casual remark. It felt like a premonition. After Hackman passed away, this same cousin revealed unsettling signs over the years. Strange cars often parked far away in front of the house, sometimes running all night without anyone getting out. Eerie calls in the middle of the night with only the sound of soft breathing before the line went dead, and nameless letters with just a few handwritten words. "We see you?" Hackman never officially acknowledged being followed, but his cousin confirmed that he was aware. He knew. There were always two suitcases in the house, one filled with personal belongings and the other with documents that no one had ever seen. Hackman lived like an exile in his own home, perpetually prepared to abandon everything and vanish if necessary. Why? Because of what he knew and what he had kept close throughout his final years. Hackman turned down all invitations to return. No honorary Oscars, no Lifetime Achievement Awards, no participation in any commemorative events. This was partly due to his genuine disdain for Hollywood's hypocrisy, but mostly because he understood that just stepping out of the safe door in Santa Fe would invite the old hands to reach out and choke his last breaths. Some claimed Hackman was paranoid, but those who spent time with him in that wooden house, who listened to his fragmented tales of night parties in Beverly Hills, the deals made behind closed doors, and the young stars who never got their chance to shine, knew he wasn't delusional. He was simply one of the few who had lived long enough to share the story. Yet no one could tell if those stories had escaped Hackman's lips in time, or if they had followed him into the depths of eternal silence. Chapter 6. The Final Nail in the Coffin. Gene Hackman's last days were not spent in peace, like the scenes of an aging legend savoring his sunset years. Instead, they were filled with suffocating tension, as if every breath was being stifled, and every glimmer of a new day was overshadowed by the darkness of memories he couldn't erase. About 3 weeks before Hackman passed away, his cousin noticed a strange change. Hackman, who had long severed most ties with Hollywood, was making phone calls constantly, not to his younger. Hackman turned not to the reporters who had once sought him out, but to a few familiar faces, those who belonged to a secret circle of silence that he had broken the agreement with years ago. They had once been allies, but now most had vanished, not just from memory, but from life itself. More disturbingly, all had met bizarre ends. Car accidents in the dead of night, slipping and falling down stairs in their own homes, or even sudden deaths in lavish Beverly Hills mansions. These deaths appeared accidental, but Hackman never believed in accidents in the world of those who had sold their souls for glory. "I have no one left to talk to," he mumbled one day, standing by the office window, his hand trembling as he gripped the old landline phone. Calls went unanswered, voicemails were never returned, and the familiar voices had been silenced forever. After Hackman passed away, a series of scattered notes were discovered in his desk drawer, written in hurried handwriting without a clear beginning or end, like hastily assembled pieces of an incomplete puzzle. On a crumpled piece of paper, there was only one line: the same faces, the same hands, the same silence. That sentence echoed like a haunting refrain in other notes, as if Hackman was trying to convey a message. The same hands, the hands that had patted him on the back when he won awards, and the same hands that signed orders to eliminate redundant witnesses. The same silence, the silence that had endured for more than half a century, shielding Hollywood's darkest secrets where power reigned supreme. The measure of a life was not solely in wealth or fame, but in the stark realities of existence and mortality. When Gene Hackman's death was announced, the official cause was listed as natural causes, a tidy conclusion with no clues for the curious to pursue. Yet for those who truly understood the world, Hackman had escaped. The notion of natural was a facade. Was this the end, or merely a final warning from Hollywood to those who dared to challenge the status quo? An old friend, one of the few remaining from that era, told the press after Hackman's funeral, "Gene knew the rules. He understood them better than anyone, and he was acutely aware of the consequences of forgetting who holds the power." The story of Gene Hackman does not conclude with a quiet grave in Santa Fe. It culminates with the sound of an office door slamming shut behind the first police officer entering the wooden house, where a silent landline phone sat by the window, and the last piece of paper was discovered tucked beneath a drawer. I was never meant to leave alive. As Gene Hackman closed his eyes, his final words resonated, not a farewell melody, but a scream that tore through the glittering facade Hollywood used to mask its rotting conscience. That secret, who would dare to listen? His utterance was not just from a man on the brink of departure, but the voice of a tortured conscience. He had lived a remarkable life, yet it was marred by regrets and losses. In his last moments, he could no longer remain silent. He had to reveal the truth, even if it threatened to upend an entire world. Those left behind, would they confront that truth? Would they dare to hear those words to the very end? Or would they choose to block their ears, shut their eyes, and persist in their illusions and lies? Gene Hackman may have departed, but his words lingered as a warning, a challenge, and perhaps the answer that could shape the fate of an entire industry.